understand everything about the upcoming new character, who's also known as Escoffier. You might also know her as the chef girl from the official character teaser from not so long ago. These aside, she's going to be a 5-star polearm user and have a cryovision. As for her profession and kit, she's a chef from Fontaine, and she's mainly going to be an off-field support and healer, but due to the way her kit works, she can be played as a sub-DPS as well. Also, before starting with her kit, if you're planning to get her or someone else like Skirk and have been saving and planning to buy Welkins or doing other in-game purchases for them, then you can do that and save money while doing it through LD Shop. LD Shop offers everything that's offered in-game at a much cheaper rate. As for the website itself, it's highly rated on websites like Trustpilot and is being used by tons of players worldwide daily. All you have to do is select the pack you want, enter your in-game details, set up your payment method, and you're done. The website can also be used not only for Genshin, but for lots of other games as well, so try it out from the link in the pinned comment or the description. Now, starting with her Ascension itself, she gains crit rate with her Ascension, gaining a total of 19.2% crit rate at level 90. Going to her attacks, both her normal and charged attacks aren't really that special. In her normal attack, she hits up to 3 times, and this is what her charged attack looks like. Pretty normal. Moving on to her skill, it'll have 2 different modes, them being tap and hold. Now, her hold mode is primarily an extra mechanic and doesn't really offer anything gameplay-wise. So during normal exploration or fighting, you're only going to be able to use the tap variant of her skill. We'll understand how and why so in a second. So as for the tap variant of her skill, after clicking it, she'll deal AoE cryo damage to nearby opponents and summon a thing called the cooking mech. Think about it as a pet. And what it'll do is it'll follow the current active character around and shoot at enemies, dealing cryo damage. Now, as for her hold variant, after you hold down her skill, instead of the cooking mech following you, it'll be placed down on the field. Then it'll act like a parametric transformer, so you can fill it up with different ingredients, and afterwards, when you attack it, it'll absorb all elemental attacks, and when the absorbed elemental energy hits a certain limit, Escoffier can convert the ingredients placed inside into different types of dishes. So she pretty much has a parametric transformer built into her kit. As for how often you can use it, you can make a few dishes out of it. The number isn't specified, but when you hit that limit, it'll go into a cooldown for 7 days. Going to her burst, using it allows her to heal your party members, as after using it, she deals AoE cryo damage and restores HP to all nearby party members based on her attack. So overall, how you'd want to use Escoffier in a team is to switch to Escoffier, tap her skill once, and switch to another main DPS or whoever else you want. And after a while, switch back to Escoffier, use her burst, and then her skill again, and keep repeating it. Now that that's done, let's look at all her multipliers. Furthermore, as for her talent leveling priority, you'd want to level up her elemental burst first, then her elemental skill, and lastly her normal attacks. Now going to her passives, her first passive gives her an effect called the Rehab Diet for 9 seconds after she uses her elemental burst. So after using her burst, Escoffier will restore HP for all nearby active characters at intervals. So this interval is around 0.9 seconds, and it lasts for around 9 seconds. So in total you'd get about 9 ticks of healing. As for the healing itself, the healing will be based on 138% of her attack. Her second passive is really good, as it decreases the hydro and cryo resistance. So when you have 1, 2, 3, and 4 hydro or cryo characters in the party, Escoffier will decrease the hydro and cryo resistance of any opponent that is hit by her elemental skill or her elemental burst by 5, 10, 15, and 55% respectively for 12 seconds. Now there's a bit more to this. You might be thinking that you need 4 cryo or 4 hydro specifically to get the maximum resistance decrease, but it's not like that, as 4 hydro wouldn't even be possible. So instead it just counts the total party members with hydro or cryo vision. So you could have 1 cryo and 3 hydro, or 2 hydro and 2 cryo character, and you'd still get a 55% resistance reduction. The third passive just talks and explains the hold mode of her skill, and since we already understood that, we can skip this one. So now that we understood her kit, all of it might be a lot to take in. So let's recap the things in short before moving on to other stuff. This is Escoffier. She's a cryo off-field support. Her normal and charged attacks aren't anything special. As for her skill, it had 2 modes. Tap was for off-field support, and hold converted the cooking mech into a parametric transformer. Her burst allowed her to deal AoE cryo damage and heal nearby party members based on her attack. Her first passive just allowed her to heal more. Her second passive decreased hydro and cryo resistance, and the last passive just talked about the cooking mech's hold mode. Now looking at her builds, since she's a polearm user, mainly scales of attack, and needs stats like energy recharge, you'd want to take a polearm that revolves around those. For 5-star options, you have her own 5-star signature polearm, and it's called Symphonist of Sense. It provides a decent base attack and has crit damage as its substat, offering a total of 66.2% crit damage at level 90. As for its passive, it just focuses on increasing the equipping character's attack. So your attack will be increased after equipping the weapon, healing, and while being off-field. Other than this, you can use the Skyward Spine, Calamity Queller, and Engulfing Lightning. For 4-star polearms, you can use the Favonius Lance as critical hits regenerates energy for Escoffier. If not that, then you could also use Wavebreaker's Fin, as it has a high base attack and helps buff Escoffier's elemental burst. You can also use the Catch, which increases elemental burst's damage and crit rate. And lastly, if you have the limited event polearm called Missive Wind Spear, it's good as well, as she's buffed after an elemental reaction is triggered. These are just a few options, but feel free to use something else if you don't have these. Just make sure that whatever the weapon offers, it favors Escoffier. As for her artifact sets, her best artifact set will probably be Noblesse Oblige, since with the 2-piece set, you get 20% more elemental burst damage, and with the 4-piece set, all party members get a 20% attack bonus for 12 seconds. This set is ideal for her since her kit mainly revolves around her being off-field, with occasional heals from her burst. Alternatively, you could also be running her with 2-piece Maiden and 2-piece Ocean Hued if you solely want to build her as a healer. Moving on, as for the substats on the artifacts, the things you'd want are either attack percent or energy recharge on Sans. If you have sufficient energy recharge on her, then go with attack here. But if not, then go with energy recharge. For Goblet, you'd want cryo damage or attack. Now again, this one depends. If you want to increase her damage by a lot, then go with the cryo damage bonus. But if you want to somewhat increase her damage as well as healing, then go with the attack percentage. Lastly, for her Circlet, if you'd want to increase her damage, use crit rate or crit damage. If you want improvements in both healing and damage, then go with attack percentage again. Lastly, if you want to build her as a dedicated healer for your team, then use a healing bonus for her. As for the substats, you'd want an ER of around 160 to 180%, attack percentage or flat attack, and crit. Now, taking a look at some team comp examples, due to the way her kit works, you'd mainly want to play with her in either Hydro or Cryo teams. Some examples could be Neuvillette, me, Shinha, and Escoffier, or you could replace Neuvillette with Ayaka and me with Xingqiu. If not this, then maybe replace Xingqiu with Yelan and Ayaka with Ganyu. You get how it works. Just be sure to have either Hydro or Cryo members in your team, and you should be good. Lastly, going to her constellations, in her first constellation, when all party members are Hydro or Cryo, all party members will have their Cryo damage crit damage increased by 60% for 15 seconds after Escoffier uses her elemental skill. Her C2 improves her off-field playstyle, as after she uses her skill, she will gain an effect for 15 seconds, and what it'll do is give Escoffier 5 stacks of Cold Dish. What it does is when characters other than Escoffier deal Cryo damage, they will use 1 stack of Cold Dish and increase their damage dealt by 240% of Escoffier's attack. Also, if you hit multiple enemies with a single cryo damage attack, then the stacks will be consumed based on the number of opponents hit. Her C3 just increases her skill level by 3. Her C4 improves her overall as a healer, as it buffs her first passive quite a lot. Now, the rehab diet lasts for 15 seconds, and while it is active, you have a chance of healing double and restoring 2 energy to Escoffier when you trigger healing through the passive. This chance corresponds to Escoffier's crit rate, and it can be triggered up to 8 times per burst. Her C5 increases the level of her burst by 3. Lastly, in her C6, her skill is enhanced even further. So when your party's active character's normal charged or plunging attack hits the opponent, Cooking Mech will fire off another special projectile dealing 350% of Escoffier's attack as AoE cryo damage. This damage is considered elemental skill damage. This effect can be triggered once every 0.5 seconds and up to a maximum of 6 times within the duration of one skill skill use. Now, as for her constellations, her C1 will be her best constellation, followed by C2. Furthermore, if you're confused between either getting Escoffier's constellations or getting her weapon, then I would recommend getting her C1 first, because her C1 pretty much increases the cryo damage of party members every time she uses her skill or burst. This is much better than having her weapon and is also a good stopping point for her constellations. Now that we covered everything about her, for some final thoughts, Escoffier is primarily designed as an off-field support who buffs Hydro and Cryo through resistance reduction. If need be, she can perform heals as well, making her an all-rounder support. She's an excellent addition if you're invested in freeze or mono Cryo teams, particularly if you rely on Cryo DPS units. However, if you don't run Cryo or Hydro-heavy teams, her value diminishes entirely. On a side note, new Cryo regions are coming as well in Genshin, so will new and more powerful Cryo characters, so getting her won't be a bad idea at all, since her value is going to rise over time. However, ignoring the future predictions for now, get her if you have or actively use a Cryo and Hydro-focused team, or as a future support for upcoming characters.